Hey everyone! Today for our ISU project, myself and Will be talking about climate change. Climate change has been a huge issue today, and we hope to inform and teach you of the effects of climate change and how each of us can help combat this effect one step at a time. There is substantial evidence and proof that human-caused climate change. Current impacts on our world right now present extraordinary risks to our society and ecosystem, and we need to change our lifestyle for the better. Since most of Canada is built on forests and farming, the Canadian government has come up with ways to support biofuel services and invest in ways to clean our soil. For the next few minutes, you will be able to watch a short, in-depth video on what climate change is to further expand your knowledge for the remainder of the presentation. This video will talk about critical elements of climate change and how we need to change for our future. The link will be in Edsby. What is climate change caused by? First, we need to discuss how human emissions have caused climate change. The burning of fossil fuels is used to combust carbon dioxide, which generates greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide is a leading cause of human-induced climate change and is a very long-lived gas. This means that the gas will continue to affect the climate system during its time. It is safe to say that humans have.
So, how has the greenhouse effect played a considerable role in climate change and affecting how we live? The greenhouse effect refers to the process in which the gases are radiated toward all directions across the Earth's surface. Some of the most effective greenhouse gases include carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. However, these three gases are unable to prevent the solar radiation that enters the Earth's surface, increasing temperature. This process has been maintained throughout centuries to keep our Earth's balanced temperature. So, what are some advantages of the greenhouse effect? Some advantages of the greenhouse effect include a balance of a warm and cool climate with the sun reflecting on the Earth's atmosphere. This is very important because if we don't have a balanced amount of sunlight and darkness, the process of photosynthesis will be primarily affected. After all, in the absence of the sun and heat, plants will not be able to produce food. This affects not only the plants, but how much humans can afford to eat daily, knowing there is a shortage of food. The effect of greenhouse gases provides an opportunity for sustainable living. Greenhouse gases make sure the sun's heat is not frying us by absorbing a considerable amount of the radiation coming from the sun.
While yes, the greenhouse effect comes with many benefits to our world, but it also comes with a few disadvantages as well. There are two disadvantages of greenhouse effects, the first being global warming. While the greenhouse effect helps maintain a balance of hot and cold, it can also translate to rising temperatures. As the gas increases, their ability and power to trap the heat and radiate it back to the earth also increases. As a result of this, summers in recent years have been much hotter than they have in past decades. Another negative attribute to greenhouse effect is rising water levels. As the average temperature of the Earth increases, the polar ice caps are in danger of a meltdown. The rapid increase in water levels can lead to flooding for low-lying areas and cause an evacuation. This can cost human lives in vulnerable places such as Vancouver and Halifax, as they are put at the front lines of rising water levels. This video will further expand your knowledge and give you a better understanding of what the greenhouse effect is and how it affects climate change, along with our ecosystem.
So, how does climate change actually have a rising effect on our health? As temperatures rises, heat waves rise, which can cause many multiple health-related problems, including heat strokes, dehydration, and many more short to long-term effects. Climate change has had many major consequences in our world, and yes, these effects may be short-term, but if we don't change our ways, we will experience some serious consequences to come in the future. Climate change, as we know, also affects the process of photosynthesis as when there's less sunlight, the plants have a hard time to grow, which means there's actually a shortage of food for humans, and that is bad because we have to rely on very shortage of very small amounts of food that we have, and we can't eat freely, and we have to rely on bad quality food.
How can we combat climate change? This diagram shows where most of Canada's emissions come from. We can see that 10% of Canada's emissions come from electricity. It is important to reduce this number because we could use the 10% to implement more sustainable means of electricity, such as solar power, wind energy, and hydropower. If we continue to look through the graph, we see that Canada's largest emissions come from oil and gas. Oil and gas is an important contributor to our economy, reducing oil and gas methane emissions by 40 to 45% by the year 2025, and developing a clear fuel standard are just small ways that Canada are reducing the number of emissions caused by this sector. In Canada, most Canadians commute to and from work by car. In rural areas, cars can sometimes be the only way of getting around. In Canada, 24% of emissions alone come from transportation. Some ways the Canadian government are reducing this high number are to make changes to standing public transit and investing millions of dollars to create new modern day modes of transportation for all Canadians. The industry sector also plays a huge role in Canada. To combat such high numbers from this sector, the Canadian government has implemented the laws to price emissions from large polluters and improving industrial energy efficiency. The last sectors talk about homes and buildings, along with agriculture and forestry. At 13%, home emissions have been a huge factor in our daily lives. If we follow some simple rules, we will be able to reduce our emissions immensely. And our final sector on the list is agriculture and forestry. Since most of Canada is built on forests and farming, the Canadian government has come up with ways to support biofuel services and invest in ways to clean our soil. Canada's climate plan. These are some ways Canada are helping to fight climate change for a better life for Canadians. Some plans include clean and renewable energy, energy efficiency in homes and businesses, made in Canada clean technologies, electric vehicle charging station and alternative fuel infrastructure, public transits, investing in the Indigenous, rural, and remote communities to transition to cleaner energy sources, and support for communities to adapt to a changing climate. All these projects will help reduce Canada's emissions and prepare for a better future. If you visit Canada's website and search climate plan, you will see how Canada is fighting climate change. In Toronto, the government is implementing many ways for citizens to use other means of commuting to and from work. New transportation routes and many bike lanes around the city have made a huge difference in our way of travel. Go Transit has also come up with new park and ride services to help the daily rush on the roads.
So, how can we as Canadians make a difference through just our daily routine? There are so many things that we can do, whether it is at our local park or even at the convenience of our own home, that can make a difference. Some of these things we can do include unplugging our TVs or other home appliances that we are not using. For example, if you are going to a restaurant for dinner, you can make a point to turn off all the lights and unplug the radio, and maybe even incorporate that into your daily routine. By doing this, you reduce energy limits, which reduces the number of carbon emissions are required, which, as we know, helps the environment. So, for a long time, as many of you may know, we have been taught about the three R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. But now there's two more added into the mix. As citizens of our society, we have a simple responsibility to manage our waste sustainability. This responsibility is to do the five R's, which are reducing, reuse, recycle, refuse, and repurposing. You may be wondering how you can do each of these things on a daily basis to help the environment, and here's how. If you are at the mall and you see something, you should stop and ask yourself, do we really need this? And what will we even use it for? This is just one of many examples of how easy it is to refuse. To reduce, you could lessen the amount of energy you use to heat your facility by getting an energy outlet, which costs less. By doing this, you are killing two birds with one stone. Reusing is also very straightforward and is very similar to reducing. Some ways we can reuse is using reusable plastic water bottles, reusing packaging materials, and reusing shipping containers such as boxes. What this does is it lowers the amount of energy required to produce brand new products, and instead that energy can be used for other purposes. Then we have repurposing. When we can repurpose, uh, we can repurpose by taking something and using it for something else instead of throwing it to waste. If you are a student at St. Mike's, repurposing can even be done at school. For example, you could use a scrap piece of paper to take notes with, or even have a glue stick that runs out, and you can make it a crayon. And last but not least, if the four above options won't work, then recycle. Maybe there is no alternative. Recycle is a great way to open your eyes to all that you toss and a chance to rethink your future purchases. Some ways to recycle in our daily lives are recycling all the basics you can, whether it is paper, plastic, or even glass. Just make an effort to recycle. If we recycle our food waste, it can be used to make soil or serve as food for local farm animals.
Famous Canadian activist David Suzuki is a famous Canadian scientist who has come up with ways to lower the consequences of climate change in not only Canada, but the world. David Suzuki and his foundation have come up with ways to zero our emissions. His plan finds 10 ways to fast track Canada's decarbonization efforts. David's list is a great way for Canadians to think about their future and start following these goals in their daily lives. With his plan in place, his goal is to inspire Canadians to change how we go through our daily lives to better assist the environment to combat climate change.
Famous activist Greta Thunberg, who's only 17 years old, has inspired us with her many speeches to the world and addressing Parliament that what we are doing to this earth is wrong. Greta started her fight for climate by skipping school and protesting for change. As Greta started to become famous, she then launched many initiatives that have gotten people all over the world to make a difference and do something good. In the future, Greta wants to continue her fight by taking a year off school to campaign for climate action. Greta plans to travel to Canada and South America to meet with several environmentalist activists and see firsthand the regions most affected by climate change.
Greta Thunberg has inspired so many people with her bold statements. In the next few minutes, you will see her let out her passion for putting a stop to climate change. Thank you guys for listening to our presentation. We hope you really understood the impact of climate change. And now that you have more knowledge, we hope you can start to make the change yourself.